Welcome back to the final part of our mini-series this week on learning how to see the unseen, tapping into the invisible spirit realm that's actually inside of us. Let's start by seeing how we are already like Jesus, even right now in the world that we live in. John wrote this in 1 John 4:17. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. As Jesus is right now, this moment, and every moment, so are you and me here in this world. Not someday in the sweet by and by when we get to heaven, but right now. The Mirror version of 1 John 4:16 says this, and thus we have come to know and believe the love that God has unveiled within us. God is love. Love is who God is. To live in this place of conscious, constant love is to live immersed in God and to feel perfectly at home in his indwelling. You're not alone in adrift in the universe. You are at home in the Father's good pleasure. Listen now. You are already in the place of conscious, constant love of God. You can live your life immersed in God. You can hear from God all the time. And then, like Jesus, only say and do what you hear him tell you to say and do. I'm going to give you one word for how to do that. I've already given you that one word 17 times in this little series. Have you caught what it is? Listen. Listen to God. Christ is in you. You have the mind of Christ. He wants to speak to you. He wants you to hear him. Listen. Let me give you some tips on how to hear him. Once you make a practice of doing these, you will literally hear him speaking to you all the time. So if you're just starting out with this, first, set aside some time. If your first reaction was, if you hear yourself saying or thinking, I'm too busy, where would I ever get the time? If that's what you're thinking, I got to tell you, there's a disconnect somewhere. You can hear from God, for crying out loud. You can get wisdom from the one who knows everything. He can explain to you what's real and what's not. He can tell you what's going on in the unseen world, where reality and truth are. You wouldn't say, I can't make time for that, would you? Now, I'm not asking you to make time to study the Bible and memorize Bible verses. I'm not asking you to pray for an hour with a list of every friend and relative you have, including your third cousins twice removed who you want to have a hangnail cured. I'm not asking about that. I'm not talking to you about any spirit, things like that you may have been taught by religion. I'm talking about giving you the opportunity to listen to God, to hear from God. Initially, if you're just starting with this, you can't hear God with the TV going. Because from the TV, you get input through your five senses from people and situations who aren't listening to God. And you will actually hear from the seen and temporary world, which is totally different from what's true in the unseen and spiritual world. Initially, you won't be able to hear from God when there are other people around in the same room talking, joking, laughing, crying, whatever. Same reason. It takes initially being alone and being quiet. Sometimes it helps to have some soft background music. That can be beneficial, but I've learned that it's really best if it's not vocals, not vocal music, and not even an instrumental where you know the words to the song. Because when you have that, your mind immediately goes to the words of the song, and it keeps you from hearing from God. So initially, go somewhere where you're not going to be distracted by seeing things that you need to do. And don't be somewhere like in the midst of like the laundry room or the dishes or something cleaning that needs to be done, or in your room where you've got homework or things to do. Go somewhere where you can't see that stuff. Your mind's not on it, where you're alone and you're quiet and you can get your mind uncluttered. And then just open your mind. Have an open mindset. Sometimes I've found we can want to hear from God. I think everybody wants to hear from God. But sometimes, and this used to be true for me, our mind is so closed that we've already decided we know what God is like. And what we think that, well, I'm just not going to, if I hear something, I know it's not from him if it's different from what I think God is like. For example, just an example. If you've been taught and you have believed and you're dead set positive, as much of religion says, that God hates gays and they're all condemned to hell, you're not going to hear him when he says, I love them just like I love you and everyone. These past few years, many of us in our group have had our eyes opened, and Jesus has done a religious detox in us, and he's revealed to us a whole bunch of lies that we used to believe, and I think that's because we've been willing to open our mind and say, Lord, we want to hear from you. No matter what we've learned or thought was true or believed the party line of whatever denomination we grew up in, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what's true. We won't hear him if we have our minds made up about things and we're unwilling to hear from him. Now, just come to him with an open mind, a teachable spirit, the attitude that you want to hear from him, even if you're going to hear something that's contrary to what you have thought all your life. I used to go to God in prayer and say, God, would you fix this other person? Fix them, make them do what I want them to do. Stop them from having a bad attitude. Keep them from being contrary to me. That never worked. But when I started going to him with an open mind and heart, he started, and I said, Lord, tell me what's going on in this situation. He started showing me it was me that needed to change, and that I needed to start seeing other people the way he sees them. And then he started showing me how he sees them. So when you come to God and want to listen to him, be willing to let go of preconceived ideas and doctrines. Empty your mind. This can be hard to do at first. Just let everything go and still your mind. One practice that can help is picture sitting by a riverbank. And when a distracting thought comes to your mind, like your to-do list or a relationship challenge or a worry, whatever it is, just name that. Okay, that's financial worry. And mentally picture you're tossing that worry into the river and letting it float away. So do that, whatever comes into your mind, empty your mind, and then you can just whisper, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Just whisper his name and then be still and listen. He'll speak to you. He will. If you don't hear from him in the first few seconds, resist the urge to think, that doesn't work. I got stuff to do. Don't do that. Stay quiet and continue to empty your mind and listen to him. You'll start to hear from him. Many times, this was true with me in the beginning, he will focus just on telling you that he loves you. He might just say, I really do love you. And you might just hear that over and over again. Many times I hear him say, this is all true. Believe me, don't doubt. When you hear something from him, meditate on that. Contemplate. Ruminate about it. Focus on it. Repeat it over and over again. As you develop that practice, you'll start to hear from him quicker and quicker and more often. And eventually, you'll find yourself doing what he calls abiding. Abiding is continually experiencing seamless union with Jesus. He's there all the time. He's relating to you all the time. And eventually, you'll get to where you can actually hear his voice all the time. The secret, the key, the thing that enables us to see the unseen, to know what is true, and know that what seems to be true is not, and is fleeting and is gone, is listening. Some people call that meditation. Some people call it contemplation. Fix your eyes on what is unseen. Fix your ears on what you can hear from Jesus, and then listen. Paul says in Romans 10:17, faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. You have Jesus' faith, and you have the word of Christ in you, wanting to speak to you, actually speaking to you. Just train yourself to hear him. The Mirror Bible translates Romans 10:17 as saying, it's clear then that faith's source is found in the content of the message heard, the message of Christ. We are God's audience. Jesus is God's language, and he speaks to us today and every day. All right. How does that translate into actually living the Christ life? Putting into practice what we've learned for the benefit of other people. You will find, as you listen to him, you'll find yourself saying and doing what Jesus says and does. You'll literally experience more and more Jesus living his life, not only in you and through you, but Jesus living his life as you. That's when it gets to be really exciting and really beneficial, not only for you, but for everybody around you. Thanks for listening. See you next time.